What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips for game week 36. We're going to go through some of the popular players being transferred in and out ahead of the double game. We can give you my opinion of whether I think it's a good move or not. We're going to start off with Harry Kane. I spoke about him last week. Obviously, owners are starting to get a little bit frustrated that Son is absolutely smashing it. Meanwhile, Kane's doing okay, but not brilliant. And one of the factors, obviously, as well in the kind of Kane versus Son discussion, as it has been for weeks and weeks and weeks, is the price difference, right? So there are, maybe more forwards right now than there have been the last few weeks that are viable options, like Richarlison, like Nketiah, like Watkins possibly, especially if you haven't got a free hit. So the switch back to put money into midfield is starting to come into the thinking of a lot of people. It could be straight to Son. If they've got Son, it could be to De Bruyne, etc. So nearly 50,000 managers have already sold Harry Kane. Now, on paper, the fixtures against Burnley and Norwich, I think, look really good. I think league state, as in whether, you're fighting for the title, you're fighting for top four, is really going to play possibly a role in how these matches go. So, for example, if Spurs get to Norwich and top four's gone, they're really just playing for fun or whatever, right? Just to end the season. That feels like the kind of game where Harry Kane could go mad, right? He will shoot on sight. If there's top four up for grabs, then maybe they play slightly different, right? You just don't quite know how the game might go. So I think Kane with kind of free reign to do whatever could be an interesting option last day of the season. I also think Burnley at home is a pretty good fixture for him as well. I'm going to come on to Son stats versus Kane stats in just a second. I think a lot of people will think that Son is better for Liverpool. High line, he's going to run in behind. We're going to talk about it all week. I'd probably agree with that. Arsenal's probably a bit of a muchness. But ultimately, right, the short answer to this is, if you are selling Harry Kane to free up some money to make a bigger move that you really think is going to score you more points over the rest of the season, I don't really have a huge problem with it. Do I think that Harry Kane, we need to go out of our way to be selling him before a double game week, before Burnley at home, Norwich away? Probably not, right? Now let's talk about some of the stats recently. So this is the last 6 games. I haven't cherry picked this. I just decided to use last 6. I've not looked at last 4. I've not looked at last 8. I just decided to choose last 6. What's interesting about this is this obviously includes game week 35, 34, 33, 32, 31 and 30. And if you remember, going into game week 30 is when people started talking about selling Son to Kane for a hit, right? That Son was done. He wasn't, not necessarily done, but he was getting subbed off early. Kulusevski could cover him. Kane was in form. He was striking the ball better. All these narratives that people came up with for reasons to take the hit. And then all of a sudden, Son goes and scores 8 goals over the next 6 games and Harry Kane only gets 1. Now, the point is not to say that that wasn't a good move back then, right? It doesn't really matter now. It was 6 weeks ago. My point is that things can change quite quickly. So now we're looking at Kane to Son for a hit. Who's to say over the next 4 matches that Kane won't absolutely start smashing it? And Son has kind of, over those 4 games, overperformed quite a lot. Now, I know what the argument back to me will be. Well, Son always overperforms his XG. His finishing is great. And that is true. But we're talking more than double the amount of goals to expected goals ratio. I would expect at some point over, I don't know, X amount of matches, that might slow down a little bit. It's just whether or not you're worth or you're willing to take the gamble that stops now before the end of the season, or maybe it goes on into next season, right? So it is a tricky call to make. Whereas Kane, on the other hand, his expected goals are a little bit lower than Son. So Son has shown a bit more goal threat over the last 6 games, but he's only scored once, right? Whereas I think with Kane, I looked at the numbers over kind of the last 5 years, right? Just a quick glance. Son does overperform, right? That is true. So does Harry Kane usually. In fact, this is the first season out of the last 5 where he's actually underperforming his goals versus expected goals. And again, right, for anyone, I know not everyone likes stats, but for most people that use them, it's not perfect, right? Just because Harry Kane has 2.2 XG over 6 games doesn't mean he 100% scores 2 goals. That's not how it works. But at some point, that maybe finishing slump that Harry Kane's on, where he is underperforming slightly this year, and maybe all the stuff early on in the season with the Man City, contract talks, transfer talks, maybe that played a part. But at some point, he is going to start scoring. At some point, Spurs are going to start getting penalties again, and Harry Kane's going to put them away because he's one of the best penalty takers probably in the world, right? So yeah, I think I don't really begrudge anyone that wants to do Kane to Son or has done it or is wanting to get in Richarlison and upgrade a midfielder who they don't think is going to start twice to Son. I don't think it's a bad move at all. Son is looking great right now. He is getting slightly more chances than Kane, and he is a brilliant finisher, but so is Harry Kane. So if you've got higher priorities in your team, like you want to fix your goalkeeper, there's a midfielder you could just swap to someone else that's really good. I don't think there's really a priority to get rid of Harry Kane, but then I've probably said that for the last 3 to 4 weeks, and look what Son done. It just, like, what is your risk appetite, I guess, for just backing against Son, who's doing so well and so highly owned right now? That's really the key question. And if you're not happy to go against him, I guess just bring him in. But at some point, Harry Kane is going to start outscoring Son over multiple weeks. Could be now, just like, the opposite happened after game week 29. So with 83,000 transfers in, Richarlison is one of the forwards that people are looking at. Obviously, it could be from Harry Kane, it could be from Weghorst, Chris Wood, all these players that people are looking to get rid of. And the short answer is, for 7.5 million, I think he's a really good option. I think arguably he's one of the best forwards to bring in right now. I think if you're looking at kind of players around his price, Ollie Watkins is probably the best comparison, just because they both have back-to-back double game weeks. Obviously, Leicester do as well, but there's rotation concerns there. Whereas I think Richarlison and Watkins will probably start most games. The thing with Watkins is he's got Liverpool as one of the games, which is a little bit tougher than what Richarlison has. Also, right now, and obviously this takes into account Richarlison being fit and available and not suspended. I don't think he's going to get suspended for the Flair thing, by the way. And I think the injury or the knock that it looked like he picked up at the end of the last game against Chelsea, that was probably just a precaution that he came off. Obviously, wait and see what Lampard says. But with Richarlison, he feels like the main man at Everton right now, possibly across the whole squad, the way he's playing and the way he's trying to fight for his team. But definitely in attack, he's the main man. He's going to start up front if Calvert-Lewin's not playing. And if Calvert-Lewin does play, it's not like Richarlison's going to be on the bench. He's going to play off the left. But given how... Everton in general, and I guess Richarlison to a certain extent as well, just haven't been great this year. But right now, is what I'm trying to say, is where he looks like the main man. Calvert-Lewin, a lot of injuries, then in the team, then back out of the team. He's on the bench the last game. It's just not looking great. Whereas with Villa, Watkins is a good option for sure, but I think at any point Coutinho could shine ahead of him. I think Danny Ings, if he plays, he could take the limelight away from Watkins. Whereas I don't think Gray and Gordon kind of do that with Richarlison. So I think you are buying the main man, the guy that's going to get Everton out of this. If they're going to get out of it, it's going to be Richarlison. And you're playing Leicester straight after Europe. Then you've got Watford, which is a good fixture. Then 2 back-to-back home games. Looks pretty decent. Arsenal away in game week 38 is the only kind of thing that I'd maybe slightly worried about. If I got to game week 38 and I had to make a different transfer and I had to play Richarlison against Arsenal, I don't think it would worry me too much, but in the back of my mind, I'd maybe want to plan who else could I go to in game week 38, or could I use one of my backup forwards on the bench in game week 38 instead if I had to. So that's the only question mark over him. Otherwise, I think he looks like a really good option. Nketiah is obviously a lot cheaper, for example, but he doesn't have that second double in 37. If you're free hitting in 37, then maybe it's a slightly different question over whether you should go for him. But I still think he's a pretty decent option. Like, Gabriel Jesus might play in Europe tonight. He then might play both games in game week 36. But we all know the kind of risks that are there. So yeah, that was probably a longer answer to a shorter question, or maybe a shorter answer. It should have been a shorter answer, is what I'm trying to say. And I've just prolonged it even longer by saying that. But yes, Richarlison, great option right now. I may even bring him in myself this week. So I don't usually include goalkeepers in the transfer tips video, but it looks like a few people are making transfers for goalkeepers this week. So let's talk about it. 51,000 transfers in for Schmeichel already. Maybe you're in a similar position to me where you got Jose Sarr and you're thinking about getting rid of him because the double's not great. Your backup goalkeeper is Dubravka against Man City. Not looking ideal, so you want to get someone new in. And Schmeichel looks pretty good. Now, I've got to mention free hit 37 again, right? Because everyone's on slightly different chip strategies and transfer strategies. And I'm not mentioning free hit 36 because obviously if you're using it this week, you're not making a transfer. So why would that come into account? If you're free hitting in 37, then obviously you only need to worry about the fixtures in 36 and 38. So Schmeichel looks ideal. 3 home fixtures, really good. If you've got the money, you could consider Ederson instead. Better defence, better team. Obviously you've got Newcastle and Wolves in 36 and then Villa in 38. So you could argue the fixtures are slightly worse for Man City, but they are a much, much better team. So if the money's there, I would prefer Ederson. Let's come at this from the fact that you're not free hitting rotating. You're just looking at bringing in another keeper, and you're looking at Schmeichel. He's got back-to-back doubles. So does Pickford, and so does Martinez at Villa as well. I don't think I'd go for Martinez. I think that Liverpool game, they're definitely conceding in that. And I just think looking at the fixtures on paper, and obviously Villa have also got Man City last day of the season, I'd probably opt for one of Schmeichel or Pickford. So let's quickly compare them a little bit. One quick thing to say before I do that, the only slight doubt in my mind over Schmeichel is they're obviously playing in Europe this week. So against Everton at home, there's going to be some rotation. I don't think Schmeichel gets rotated for what it's worth. It's more the defence in front of him. It could be a little bit weaker. And obviously, if they do get through to the final, there is a high likelihood that they also rotate players for Southampton at home. They might rotate a little bit for Norwich, Watford and Chelsea just to keep players fresh, just because they've got so many games in kind of quick succession. But if they go through, Everton at home, Southampton at home, definite rotation for me, and that would make the defence slightly weaker. So that's kind of one mark against going for Schmeichel over maybe a Pickford, because obviously Everton got nothing else to play for apart from staying out of the relegation zone, and so they're going to play their first choice 11 probably a little bit more often than maybe Leicester. If they go out, there could still be some rotation for Everton, but obviously there'd then be a lot less elsewhere, especially for Southampton at home. So just keep an eye on Europe this week, basically, is what I'm saying. But outside of that, forgetting about rotation for a second, I do think I prefer Schmeichel over Pickford. I mean, sometimes you can get fixated on one set of fixtures. So you look at Everton at home, Norwich, and everything, I've got to go for them. Obviously, you need to look at the rest. They've both got one kind of tricky fixture, I would say, which is Chelsea away and Arsenal away. Obviously, Chelsea slightly higher in the league. But I think from an attacking point of view, I wouldn't necessarily put Chelsea that much above Arsenal, if at all, right now. So I think you can probably just take both those fixtures off and say Schmeichel's got one tricky one, so's Pickford. But then I look at the home games. Schmeichel's got 3 home games. Pickford's only got 2. And they've both got Watford away as well, right? So you can kind of take that one off. Pickford's got Leicester away as well, and it doesn't matter. Like, they will probably rotate in that game, but I would still always put money on Leicester scoring. They've got enough decent backup players. Like, if Vardy plays in Europe, they're going to play Dakary and Acho in the league. They could absolutely score against Everton in that game. So I think overall, when you look at the fixtures, even when you take into rotation possibilities for Leicester, I think Schmeichel still comes out on top. So if you are looking for someone from now till the rest of the season, I think it probably is Schmeichel if you're not free hitting. If you are free hitting 37, you can. I mean, if you're free hitting 37, you can probably make a case for any of the big goalkeepers, Mendy, Ederson, or Alisson. But I think Ederson would be the one for me. Coutinho is definitely one of those players that makes it into this video every single week because the fixtures have been good. Now he's got back-to-back doubles. So it's like, why would you get rid of him? Nearly 40,000 managers have got rid of him again this week. Another blank. He has not returned since game week 28 when he absolutely smashed it. I do think people were right to bring him in ahead of Norwich. Like I did say, in some scenarios, I do prefer Foden. I said kind of he's my man. I do like him as an option. But Coutinho was great, especially for those of you not free hitting. Let's try and make a case for why it's good to sell him, okay? So Liverpool at home is tough. They may rotate ahead of the FA Cup final. I don't think it's going to be such big rotation that suddenly Aston Villa run away with that game, right? So that's tough. And also, I guess the other game is an away game. Burnley may be playing slightly better right now. Obviously, trying to get out of relegation themselves, a bit like Everton. And it's an away game. The 2 games in 37 look really nice. But obviously, if you are free hitting that week, it makes Coutinho kind of a less viable option. And in game week 38, there's nothing to say you can't play him, but you're probably going to want to deal with him. You're probably going to want to transfer him out to someone with better fixtures, right? For example, if Maddison's going to play against Southampton at home, that's a good fixture. Chelsea have got Watford at home, so Havertz, Mount could be options. You got Foden, maybe whichever other Man City midfielder that's cheap starts that game. There's lots of options. So I feel like if you've got Coutinho, you're already booking a transfer out for him in game week 38 anyway, so you could maybe make the case to bring that forward. The question is, which midfielder are you bringing in this week that you think will definitely start twice and has a bit more appeal than Coutinho? I'm of the opinion, I know I talk about Foden a lot, but whatever happens in Europe tonight, I feel like he's got a good chance of starting both games because he's just had a rest against Watford. Again, not guaranteed, but I do like that move. I think with Mount and Havertz this week, there's just such a high risk of rotation against Leeds, in my opinion. Not guaranteed because of top 4 not being like 100% secure, but because of the FA Cup, there is kind of big reason to rotate. I do think, for what it's worth, slight tangent, if top 4, looks a little bit iffy going into that Leeds game. Like, top 4 is more important than the FA Cup for Chelsea. Simple as that. Yes, of course, you'd like to win a trophy, but money-wise, getting into the Champions League is huge, as we know. So there's not a guarantee that, like, Mount, especially Mount, maybe not have it so much, but Mount gets rested for one of those games. He may play both of them, but it's going to depend a lot on kind of top 4 and what that's looking like, right? We might not know before, or we're not going to know before the deadline how things might change after that first game. But when I look elsewhere, unless you don't have someone like Saka, I don't really know what midfielders are kind of worth like moving to. Like, this is the fixtures for this week, and you're looking at the teams with 2 games. So we've just spoken about Man City, Everton midfielders. I mean, Gray, Gordon, possibly. I don't think they're better than Coutinho, though, to be honest. Maddison against Norwich at home, Everton at home is really good if you don't think he's going to get rotated against Everton. That's the only thing I'll be thinking of. Kulusevski, maybe, but the Spurs fixtures aren't ideal with Liverpool away in there either. And again, I know Coutinho's got to play Liverpool as well, but you're using the transfer on doing it. So I think you just realise that the last few weeks, it's absolutely sucked on him, and the fact that he's not returned. But if you haven't got a free hit, I don't really see how you can justify selling him. I think you probably just leave the transfer to 38. Like I said, you can try and justify it that you're going to transfer him out anyway, so just do it now. And again, if that's a downgrade and that gives you more money to spend, then maybe. But a lot of the players on a similar price, I just don't think are worth moving to, even though he has blanked a hell of a lot, right? And his minutes have come down a little bit as well. So again, if I just bring up his recent play time, I don't think he's going to get benched. Although, again, players could get benched. Those that have got to play 4 games over the next 2 game weeks, they could miss 1 game. A lot of them might only play 3 or 4. That is a possibility. But his minutes in general have come down a bit. So 75, 78, 69, 73. Like, he hasn't made it past 78 minutes for the last 4 games now. Whereas before that, it was kind of 90, 90. Okay, 176, then an 80, 85, 90. So I don't know what the reason for that is, but it probably is worth monitoring slightly. You could maybe, again, mark that against him and put him as like maybe a slightly worse option than he was a few weeks ago. But ultimately, I don't think I'd sell him. Let me know below what you think of all these players I've discussed. Who are you thinking of transferring in and out this week? Give it a like if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button, and I will be back tomorrow with team selection.